The research station on Kepler 442d sat on a basalt plateau 300 kilometers from the nearest settlement. The Moon orbited a gas giant in the habitable zone, but its 47-hour rotational period meant extended darkness and temperature swings that challenged even the most sophisticated environmental systems. Marcus Webb, 73 years old, and his wife Elena, 68, had maintained the automated weather arrays for 11 years. They lived in a prefabricated habitat module designed by the Confederation's Engineering Corps, but they had also built a second structure 200 meters away using local materials and techniques Marcus remembered from his childhood in northern Canada. The structure was a semi-subterranean shelter dug 3 meters into the frozen regolith, roofed with salvaged metal panels and insulated with 2 meters of compacted snow and ice. Marcus had excavated it over 6 months using manual tools, and Elena had lined the interior walls with thermal blankets scavenged from supply crates. The entrance was a narrow tunnel angled downward to trap cold air below the living space. They kept it stocked with dried food, water containers, and a small alcohol stove that required no electrical power. The Sidrathi research team arrived in late autumn to study the plateau's apex predators, the creatures locally termed ridge stalkers. The Sidrathi were a species with advanced biothermal regulation and a technological tradition spanning 40,000 years. They established a climate-controlled observation post equipped with quantum batteries, force field barriers, and thermal signature dampeners. Dr. Kesesthar, the team leader, explained to Marcus that their systems could maintain internal temperatures of 18 degrees Celsius, regardless of external conditions, and that their barriers would repel any biological threat through controlled electromagnetic pulses. Marcus mentioned his earthen shelter during a supply exchange. He explained that it maintained a stable temperature between -5 and 0 degrees Celsius without power, relying on geothermal differential and the insulating properties of compressed snow. Kesesthar examined the crude structure through optical sensors and noted that it represented inefficient use of labor and materials. The Sidrathi scientist observed that such primitive methods were unnecessary when reliable technology existed, and that the shelter's minimal heat signature would provide no protection against the ridge stalkers, who hunted by detecting motion and electromagnetic fields rather than thermal patterns. Elena asked whether the Sidrathi systems had redundancy in case of failure. Kesesthar indicated that their quantum batteries held enough charge for 90 days of continuous operation, and that failure probability was calculated at 0.003% over that period. The Sidrathi did not stock backup heating sources because their risk assessment models deemed such measures statistically unjustifiable. The temperature began dropping on day 17 of the research mission. Kepler 442d entered an eclipse period where the gas giant blocked solar radiation for 68 consecutive hours. The normal nighttime low was -40 degrees Celsius, but meteorological readings showed an Arctic air mass descending from the polar regions. Within 12 hours, the external temperature reached -72 degrees. The Sidrathi observation post maintained internal climate control without difficulty, though power consumption increased by 40%. The ridge stalkers became active at -75 degrees. The pack numbered 11 individuals, each approximately 4 meters long with hexapodal locomotion and sensory organs that detected electromagnetic emissions across a broad spectrum. They moved toward the research station, attracted by the quantum battery's energy signature and the thermal barrier's continuous electromagnetic output. The Sidrathi activated their defensive systems, which generated pulses designed to create neural discomfort in carbon-based predators. Marcus watched from the main habitat as the ridge stalkers circled the Sidrathi post. The creatures did not retreat from the electromagnetic pulses. Instead, they began testing the barrier with systematic probing actions, striking the force field at intervals and withdrawing to assess the response. Marcus contacted Kesesthar on the communication link and suggested that the aliens might consider moving to the earthen shelter, where the minimal energy signature would make them less detectable. Kesesthar replied that the barrier remained at 98% effectiveness and that abandoning the research equipment was not protocol. The temperature dropped to -84 degrees at hour 43 of the eclipse. The Sidrathi quantum batteries began exhibiting reduced efficiency due to thermal contraction in their containment matrices. The force field flickered twice, each interruption lasting 1.3 seconds. The ridge stalkers intensified their attacks, striking the barrier in coordinated patterns that suggested collective intelligence. Power consumption in the observation post increased to 200% of normal levels as the climate control system struggled to maintain temperature against the extreme cold. At -87 degrees, the thermal barrier collapsed. The Sidrathi emergency systems activated backup heating, but the ridge stalkers breached the outer wall within 90 seconds. Kesethar transmitted a distress signal, and Marcus responded by opening the earthen shelter's entrance tunnel and lighting 2 alcohol lamps near the opening to mark its location in the darkness. The Sidrathi evacuation took 4 minutes. 3 team members reached the earthen shelter before the ridge stalkers surrounded the observation post. Kesethar arrived last, moving with difficulty due to reduced biothermal efficiency in the extreme cold. Marcus sealed the entrance tunnel with a snow block and extinguished the exterior lamps to eliminate any electromagnetic signature. The interior temperature of the earthen shelter was -2 degrees Celsius. The compressed snow and ice in the walls absorbed external temperature fluctuations, and the 3-meter depth placed the living space below the layer where frost penetration occurred. The geothermal gradient provided a minimal but constant heat source of approximately 40 watts, enough to prevent the interior from reaching lethal cold. Marcus lit the alcohol stove, which added another 200 watts of heat and raised the temperature to 3 degrees above freezing within an hour. The ridge stalkers remained above ground for 16 hours. Their electromagnetic sensors detected no active power sources in the earthen shelter, and their motion detection organs registered no significant vibrations. The pack investigated the entrance tunnel, but did not attempt to dig through 3 meters of frozen earth to reach a target that produced no clear signals. The Sidrathi team members, accustomed to climate-controlled environments, found the near-freezing temperature uncomfortable but survivable. Elena distributed thermal blankets and hot water from the melted snow, and Marcus maintained the alcohol stove at a low flame to conserve fuel. The temperature outside reached -91 degrees Celsius at hour 56 of the eclipse, the coldest measurement recorded on Kepler 442d in 40 years of monitoring. The Sidrathi observation post's remaining systems failed completely at this temperature, and the quantum batteries entered thermal shutdown. The ridge stalkers eventually dispersed at hour 62, moving toward other electromagnetic sources across the plateau. When solar radiation resumed at hour 68, the external temperature rose to -53 degrees within 4 hours. Marcus and Elena emerged first to assess the surface conditions. The observation post had been partially dismantled by the ridge stalkers, who had consumed the insulation materials and damaged the containment matrices in their search for heat. Kesethar and the research team followed, moving slowly in the returning light. The Sidrathi scientist examined the earthen shelter with more careful attention than before. Kesethar asked Marcus to explain the thermal properties of compressed snow, the significance of the entrance tunnel's angle, and the calculation method for determining adequate depth below the frost line. Marcus described the principles as his grandfather had taught him. Cold air sinks, Earth holds steady temperature below a certain depth, and passive insulation requires no power to fail. The rescue shuttle arrived 31 hours later. The Sidrathi team filed their incident report, noting that human indigenous survival architecture had proven effective under conditions that exceeded the operational parameters of advanced technological systems. Marcus and Elena returned to their prefabricated habitat and resumed maintenance of the weather arrays. They kept the earthen shelter stocked and ready, as they had before, making no particular mention of its performance during the eclipse period. The facts existed in the meteorological records. -91 degrees Celsius survived in a hole in the ground, 3 meters deep, insulated with snow, and heated by a flame that consumed 30 milliliters of alcohol per hour.